Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Scott Kinney. I'm very pleased to be hosting and moderating the panel today. You may be here because you're a provider of learning programs, learning technology, and the subject and the concept of the impact of that learning is really important to your go-to-market and your customer success, or you invest in learning programs, learning technology, and you need to prove out and demonstrate the value of that learning to your peers, to your funders, to your stakeholders. Or you came because you need a quiet place to sit here on day 4 of a long conference. You're all welcome, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. The topic is largely in the realm of ROI of learning, but we're going to focus on a particular part of that today. And I've been coming to the summit for a long time, and one of my observations from this one is that, at least in the area of workforce learning, quite predictably, Gen AI is a very big topic, but also others that are getting a lot of attention in what can be a challenging market for both providers and practitioners of learning and learning tech. Upskilling of frontline workers, also hearing a lot about that, and there's a lot of energy around that topic. But also, more than I've seen before, the subject of ROI, the ROI of learning. That concept for Kirkpatrick devotees, it goes back to the 1960s. It's been a holy grail for learning practitioners and providers for a long time. But I think, especially in today's environment, it's getting a really renewed focus on all sides. So what we hope to do today is talk about one part of that in particular. We might go in a few different directions, but that's the revenue, the link between learning and growth, between investments in learning and company growth in either a direct way or indirect but compelling and believable way, because at the end of the day in the C-suite, particularly again in today's market, it's all about growth. And if you can demonstrate not just cost avoidance or some more important but less mission critical objectives for CEOs, if you can show the link between learning and growth, that seems like a particularly exciting place to be. So kind of start out, I'll just sort of work down the line here, start with Rochana, and do you think that I think we all conceptually believe that link can exist, should exist, but how are you thinking about that? How are you seeing it? And what are some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So I strongly believe in it. I feel like I'm making a career out of saying that learning drives revenue or learning drives growth. And in this context, I really think about 2 key stakeholders. One, and the 2 forms that you were saying, right? Like, one, we have to enable. So I work for Databricks, which is a product, data and AI platform company. So our success means that people are using the platform and using it effectively. And I think about that with the context of customers and our own people. And so I think about learning very holistically in that context. And really the way is, who are all the users in that life cycle of revenue? And of course, our own people have to be enabled first, but then ultimately the users of the customer have to be enabled too. And so for years now, previously when I was at Google, learning, at least the customer education side, is very driven by P&L. Like, it's a service, charge for it and make margins. And what was really fascinating is that when you could actually so we did a data science study, and we were actually able to prove it out that training the right people at the right time on how to use the product was not just going to draw incremental revenue causally, right? So using data science experts, but also that these users were more sticky, meaning they don't churn after because they incorrectly used the product first, and then they had to optimize and churn later. So that was a remarkable thing I want to say about 6-7 years ago when we did that, and literally the conversation I was having with my CEO at that time was, well then just give it away. Train everybody, and can you causally prove that it'll drive? And I can give you $1 billion and make it happen. I'm like, well, there is a fine line between how much, and just giving it away doesn't mean you've trained anybody. Content does not equal learning. And so that was really fascinating. So that's, I feel like, the journey that we are in right now is figuring out the right partner, the right user, and at the right time, making sure that we're training them, because it's a given that learning drives revenue. I do have more stories on the internal side, but I'll stick with that and make sure others get to share.
Julia, at UpLimit, formerly Co-Rise, I remember you saying one of the things you prided yourselves on is being kind of first to market with high quality, immersive, engaging learning experiences, often on the technology side, but a variety of key areas. How has driving growth shaped your decisions about what to offer, or what kinds of responses do you get from clients about that link?
Yeah, and one of the things I'll actually call out is a word that Roshna used multiple times as you were talking, which was enable. And one of the trends that I'm seeing in learning is actually this shift from training to enablement. And like, if you think about enablement, implicit in that word is that it's a requirement to do your job. So sales enablement, you're not going to throw a sales rep into a customer call without having, knowing what they're selling. Engineering enablement, you're not going to throw your engineer into, working on the tech stack without knowing what the tech stack is, or customer enablement. And I think there is learning that is critical to do your job, whether it's onboarding or sort of ongoing learning. And that's actually the link that I think is often missing, as opposed to then how you measure it. Like, it's is what your learning program is deeply tied to what the business needs? And then if it is, you can figure out what the right metrics are, whether they're direct metrics like what you would use for sales enablement in terms of actual revenue, or indirect ones on customer education in terms of product adoption or something like that. But the first step of it is this, is this learning mission critical to the company and very tied to a business initiative? And so for us, where we started was somewhat fortuitously focused on sort of AI upskilling. And it was sort of a year before the generative wave, AI wave took off. And that has become a sort of hair on fire need for most organizations as they're trying to figure out how to upskill their teams in this new area that is mission critical for the company.
Yeah. Have you heard, and then we'll go to Kathy, any stories or data, or both, coming back from customers about the link to actual revenue growth, or has that not happened yet?
I would say it's still, for us, we're 2.5 years old, it's still early days, but a lot of them we're tapping into sort of existing programs that have shown efficacy. So working with amazing customers like Databricks, who already has a really incredible program around upskilling their customers in Databricks and using UpLimit to be able to scale that program. So it's I guess we help enable our customers with these programs that are already mission critical programs that have already sort of shown a level of efficacy.
Yeah, great, thanks. Kathy, what have your experiences been like?
The company I work for is a financial services organization, a derivatives exchange, global business, global derivatives exchange. One of the things about our talent strategy has typically been we're relatively small, so we only have about 3,500 employees. So our talent strategy was often buy. Well, in 2021, we signed a deal with Google. They invested $1 billion in us, and we are in the process of moving all our applications to the cloud. We're also implementing the product operating model. And so we have a sizable skill gap in that our existing staff has a sizable amount of upskilling that needs to be done in a short period of time. We've made commitments to the street on how quickly we're gonna get to the cloud, and so there is a direct tie to revenue with respect to how quickly we can upskill and get our applications in the cloud. And then also moving to the product operating model, you know, we've got a lot more need for soft skill training and development. And so I think for my organization, one of the things that we've really been focused on is ensuring that the training that we are providing is actually working. And so as we have teams that are moving apps to the cloud or teams that are going through the transformation, we look at the ones that are successful and look at the learning paths and are they taking training? What's different between the groups that are actually successful in migrating the apps to the cloud and moving to the product operating model, and which ones are struggling, and really showing where, you know, the managers that are investing in that training and giving people that space in order to actually complete the training, they're actually more successful. So it's sort of constantly looking at and kind of digging in specifically with those teams to really understand, you know, where they're struggling and how we can continue to offer additional enablement for them in order to really be able to deliver.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a journey that you're on there. So, Mike, you've been in a number of roles on kind of all sides of this equation. So, what are some of your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think at Amazon we talk a lot about our leadership principles, and one of the leadership principles we speak often about is customer obsession, right? And so what that means is when we're engaging with our customers, whether it's a educational organization or it's a commercial enterprise or a government around the world, we're starting with what is the customer trying to solve, right? What is the business problem? Or if it's a nonprofit or government or educational entity, what's the mission that they're trying to achieve? And I think that means we have to first understand, you know, what metrics are they trying to influence, right? And then work backwards from those end goals, those end states that they're trying to reach, and begin to build out a strategy of how we can work together. So that allows us, inevitably, always starting from the customer first and what business problem they're trying to solve or mission they're trying to achieve, that inevitably leads to a ability to then be able to, once we build a strategy together with the customer, understand and measure, okay, what's been the impact? Right? What growth have we seen? What has been the impact on revenue? Because we've started with the customer problem first and what they're really focused on. The second thing I would add is that, similar to what you're describing, I mean, every customer, essentially, every customer conversation, we talk about two things. We talk about how can we help them go faster? How can we innovate in the cloud faster? How can they be more agile using AWS services? And then often that very next conversation leads to, yes, I want to do more with my organization. I want to leverage the cloud, but I don't have the skills. My team doesn't have the skills to be able to build and innovate and to go as fast as what we want. And so then we have that next conversation about, okay, what is your learning strategy? How are you going to train your people so that you can realize the value of technology like generative AI faster? And so again, it all comes back to what is the customer trying to achieve? Let's work backwards from that goal that they have in mind. And then, of course, let's make sure we have a learning and training and development strategy embedded with the technology that you're building, the applications that you're building.
Yeah. Question for all of you then. The concepts that you're explaining, most of them are not new. The idea of assessing and caring about and measuring the impact of your products and services, not only at the individual learner level, but at the organizational level. So what is changing? We talked about this enablement term. What is changing to help enable providers and practitioners actually assess that impact? Is there any reason to think we're going to be better at this in the next few years?
Well, I can chime in. I think first, I think in the past we've always thought of learning equals courses. Sometimes it's learning equals content, and sometimes learning equals courses. And if you broaden that out to think about we're focusing on enablement of the user, meaning providing them more support just in the flow of work, I think AI is going to be hugely valuable in doing that, right? Like, so if we can actually understand so I focus a lot on sales and field enablement as well, and I have to think about what has this solution architect done with their account and Salesforce? what has they been used. And if we gather all of that data, we're able to provide them much more targeted next best action. And so it's not about skill as in I've mastered a skill. It's enablement in the form of you now know what to do on your job in the most meaningful way. And so I do think that with the amount of data that we are collecting and using intelligence, I'm not even calling it broad generative AI, I'm just saying using machine learning predictions to actually understand what should we target this. I think it'll become a lot easier for us as education folks to target and personalize what we are offering to the user in terms of enablement, and then measure that much, much more succinctly. So again, I've been fortunate enough in the last decade plus to work with organizations that are hugely focused on data all the time. So I've just gotten better at collecting everything. And then when you're collecting everything, it becomes easier to make recommendations. And I do think that with the wave that we are in right now, measurement is going to be easy. But as enablement professionals or learning professionals, you just need to be deliberate about that from day one. If you don't have data analysts and engineers on your team, you should think about hiring one, would be a strong recommendation.
Any other thoughts about whether we're getting better at assessing impact?
I think one thing I would add is just, I think being in a sort of recessionary environment over the last 2 years, I think has forced learning teams to think about this. I think it's forced teams to sort of cull certain programs and think about which programs are mission critical, and then how do you measure them and really show that it's translating into outcomes. And I don't think it has to be a direct KPI towards revenue. Most companies across all departments have lots of KPIs that are not revenue. Like there is strategic priorities, beneath that revenue line that are accepted and that you work towards and that push the company forward. So I don't think it has to be revenue, but it does have to be a metric that would move the business forward. And I think this environment has forced companies and forced programs to think more about that.
Yeah, I think there has absolutely been, but it can be an important addition to your marketing strategy, positioning strategy about the impact. But in an environment like this, it's an absolute necessity to be able to show that linkage and demonstrate it. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add, I think from a ROI perspective, it's equally important that we accelerate the speed at which learning solutions, learning technology can be adopted and then deployed within your organization. So that's been an area where we've been focused on. I mean, we talk all the time. So I work directly with our ed tech customers globally, including a lot of the ed techs here at this event. We support, I think, 93% of the GSV top 150 ed techs. And one of the challenges, as this room knows, if you're an ed tech, is that lengthy procurement cycle, right? And all the legal hoops you have to jump through in order just to get a deal across the board. And so one of the things we've been focusing on is ways to streamline that procurement process. So AWS supports commercial customers, a lot of which are in the market for L&D solutions. And what we've done is set up essentially an online marketplace. Think about Amazon.com, right? How easy is it to go to Amazon.com and shop? Well, we are working on doing the same for procuring software solutions, including L&D and learning tech. And what we're doing is we're working with our ed tech customers, and we're saying, hey, look, if you list your solution on AWS Marketplace, this is going to give you visibility in front of all of our commercial customers, L&D leaders at Fortune 500 companies globally, leaders of governments, educational institutions that are in the market for your solution. And this will allow them to actually use their AWS account to purchase your solution immediately through a couple clicks on our website, put that solution in motion, adopt it, and they can count on the fact that they don't have to wait for what would usually be a very long, lengthy procurement process if they were working one-to-one with each of our ed tech customers, right? With each having their own contract and process they have to, work through all the hoops you gotta jump through. So that's a real way to start realizing that value faster, so that immediately you can deploy the solution, you can start to track ROI, right? And then maybe pivot and determine, okay, actually this isn't working, we're gonna try something else. So that's a big focus for us.
There's certainly been a lot of research and data over the years about the ROI at the individual learner level of acquiring new skills, staying current in their discipline, and that the pace of that just continues to accelerate. And Gen AI has created whole new skill categories that individuals don't have. Is it enough to make the case to a client that if you add up all of these strong ROIs for the individual learner, that is the impact for the organization? Or do you need to demonstrate something broader than that where the organization is the client, not just the individual learner?
I can chime in, and I was actually going to take like Kathy as an example. So when I, again, reflecting on my experience with Google Cloud or now with Databricks, data, when a customer is adopting data, it's not like if the engineer is successful, then the whole company is successful. It is the engineer, it is the scientist, it is the analyst, and it is the business user that all have to work together, migrate the application, and do whatever they need to do with it. So in our case, we are very, very deliberate about making sure that the who needs to get enabled, quantify all the learners as a group. So the example, again, I'm talking of was from our study at GCP, where we actually took a stab. The hypothesis was that you need a minimum of 20 users trained in an account before you can say that they can meaningfully do something with cloud and generate revenue. And it was a hypothesis. And we turned that later into, no, it needs to be 30 users. And when it was 30 users, but 30 and 100 is where we saw the most significant shift in acceleration of revenue. So no, it's not a sum of each learner. It is what can the team do to meaningful, again, because we're thinking about growing top line revenue. Each individual user is going to be better and skilled, but for the company to have an impact, I do think it is, it's not linear like
So
that.
you need a critical mass.
Critical
that could
mass.
differ by team or function. Or
Correct. I think because it's the change, to impact top line revenue, you need significant change, you need significant newness, and that can only be done by a mass of users.
Yeah, the one place where I think there could be sort of real prioritization on the individual is thinking about like labor market changes within a company, which I think generative AI is likely going to bring about, where a company has a responsibility to think about how they upskill or reskill their workforce who are in roles that might be on the decline into roles that are on the incline or in roles in other companies. And I think there was an announcement from Klarna that some of you might have seen the other week, which they were experimenting with a chatbot. They used it for customer support, and they found that it was doing the equivalent of 700 support reps at a higher rate of accuracy, faster time to resolution, same customer satisfaction. And so I think like there are very big labor market changes that are likely going to happen in the next few years. And I think companies will have a responsibility to the upskilling of the individual, making sure that they're able to be productive either within that company or at another company.
Yeah, I think it's also needs to be part of the culture and the conversation around, you know, as you need to upskill, expect to struggle, expect it to be uncomfortable, expect to make mistakes, particularly when you have, you know, seasoned folks that are trying to make a transition that have built their careers on being an expert on something, and now their role is very different, or we're asking something very different from them, and it's uncomfortable. And I think there's an element of making sure from a cultural perspective that that's seen as okay, and that one should expect the struggle, because there is, you know, human nature, there's resistance to change. Even when you know you need to change, it's very difficult. And so that's something that we've had some success with, you know, as we have some of the groups starting to move to the product operating model or move their apps to the cloud, is doing some soft skill training, you know, some training around being more, not just agile, but also being okay, with the struggle and to ensure that from a change perspective, they understand where they are in the curve, so that they can best adapt and really adopt more of a growth mindset with respect to learning and development.
Yeah, it is a bit of a tight wire, isn't it? Where if you don't invest enough in upskilling and people's development, they'll get frustrated and leave, and then you'll have the definitely not growth-driving problem of trying to rehire and all the distraction and onboarding and additional training that you have to do there. But if there's so much pressure, if you're really, really pushing it hard, that can create pressure on the organization as well. And so finding that mix has got to be a tough thing to do.
And if I might just add, this talent, the AI talent, the problem, the shortage is real, right? Like this is not a talent you can buy, because there are a handful of them and everybody wants them. And so it is really something that you have to build. So how you think about, +1 to Kathy, on the culture of the organization and whether it really fosters that idea of failing and failing fast is really critical. And I agree. But like every CIO these days, you talk to them about what is their #1 concern for AI. I don't feel like it's fear or like budget or anything else like that. Like those come up, but they're number 4 and 5 and 6. The top 5 or the top 3 are certainly talent. I don't know who can do this for me, and can they do it correctly? So they have to build the talent.
And Scott, can I ask, just by a show of hands, who in the room actually is maybe from an ed tech that sells into L&D? Is that, got a couple in the room? Okay. So, I think if you're in that position and you're wanting to, have greater success in potentially, getting a sale with an L&D leader at a Fortune 500 company or even a government or educational institution, I would ask the question, right, of, again, starting with the customer, what are they trying to achieve? Because in many cases, it may not be about, we're trying to drive this revenue figure, this sale. It could be about, we're working to invest in our employees so that our employees feel like we're a great place to work, right? And, at Amazon, we have a program called Career Choice. And one of the things I love about Career Choice is that it doesn't just provide free upskilling and reskilling on the skills and professions that we need to hire from internally at AWS to promote retention and development internally, but it also trains our people on other skills and other professions that we don't hire for, whether it's nursing or manufacturing, you name it. And so I think that's a goal. That's not the only goal, but that's a goal for some of our L&D leaders, is to not just focus on, what's in the best interest for Amazon as a company in terms of the bottom line, but also to think about what's best for our people long term, and what is the type of company and the type of culture we want to be promoting. So I think really, again, I just recommend starting with that question. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And then figure out how you can align with that.
You don't have to go that far back in ASU+GSV history, where the only real ways that companies, large companies in particular, were engaging their employees in learning and upskilling was through their LMS or in-person training. And then there's been this explosion of investment and entrepreneurship to create all these new tools because of the belief that, hey, if our employees don't think we're investing in their modern learning experience, then we're not going to be able to keep them. Is that still an issue? Is that still something that is affecting companies' ability to attract and retain top talent, or has that playing field leveled out a bit?
I want to say no, it hasn't. Everyone's still like, I only want to join a company that will develop me and help me grow. So I don't think that has leveled out. And back to the point about very, very fine balance of pushing training versus offering it to them so they feel like they're being invested in. So I think +1 to what Mike said, every company wants to be the company that not only hires great, but develops great. We certainly at Databricks think a lot about that. And, but it's a hard nut to crack for how much you require and how much feels like they made an investment, the company made an investment in me, and that's why I'm gonna stay here.
I think my company started in 2021, and then quickly the economy changed. And so it's been interesting, like building a company, you know, in this environment and sort of seeing how the learning landscape evolved. And I previously I was at Coursera when we were building out the enterprise business, and it was very different sort of selling in that environment than selling in this environment. And I think companies do still care that people are having a great experience, and they want to retain them, and they actually need to develop them because they're not going to be hiring. They need to like transition people into other roles. But the learning has to be something that ties back to the business objectives and needs to be something that's sort of must have versus nice to have. I think it is, you know, very hard to like be something that is sort of nice to have in this environment.
I think as you know, AI continues to evolve and more employees' roles are impacted by AI, I think there's an opportunity for companies really to focus on learning as being part of their employee value proposition, right? Because I think people are going to get really nervous about what it means for their job and how they can continue to stay with a company, you know, as some of the newer technologies are implemented. And I think, you know, you can offer some reassurance if you are offering, you know, deep training programs to really help upskill and move them along, and that they see that commitment from the organization to, you know, retool and upskill rather than just, you know, lay off and you know, try to buy the talent.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes left. I'd be happy. Does anybody have a question for the panel that they'd like to ask? I know we're not supposed to do this, but I have one, and we can kind of finish on this. What are you most excited about? Right? There's all these challenges. There's different kinds of struggles in the economy with finding talent. But what are you excited about? We'll start down at Mike and work this direction.
I kind of feel silly saying AI, but I mean, the truth is, I think, at least in my career in education, I can't think of a time where learning has been so front and center within the C-suite of every organization. Again, whether you're not-for-profit, for-profit, government, private sector, everyone in the C-suite is focused on learning, and it's because of how disruptive and how transformational AI is. And so I think we have an opportunity, all of us that are in this space, to really have a seat at the table, maybe where we haven't before. And our CEOs, our leadership across sectors, they're looking to us who've been in this space, right? AI, we were talking beforehand, AI, like this isn't new to a lot of us, right? And training and learning and development certainly isn't new to a lot of us. And so I think we have this opportunity, and we need to step up and really be vocal about where we see the potential to really invest in our teams, to leverage technology to get ROI faster on learning, and really take advantage of this wonderful technology, this transformational technology that can only happen if we are strategic and thoughtful about our learning plans and strategy. So that's what I'm excited about.
I love that. Kathy?
Yeah, I think, you know, being able to provide employees the training and development they need to move along as far as, you know, upskill and increase their skills in order to maintain gainful employment. I mean, I think, you know, to your point earlier about companies having a responsibility to help people along that curve, for me, you know, working in human resources, I just think it's a really great opportunity for us to show our employees how we do care, and we do want to make sure that they continue to grow and develop and have meaningful roles in the future.
I think the combination of two things. I think one, this shift towards really focusing on must-have learning, like what is the learning that is going to move the organization forward. You have to have metrics around it. It needs to be tied to business imperatives. And then relatedly, the sort of new tools that we now have at our disposal to like actually make that work. And so if we're talking about must-have learning and we're measuring it and we're looking at what's going to move the organization forward, and then we now have some really exciting ways where you can actually do very meaningful hands-on learning, personalized learning at scale using AI. And I think the combination of those two things is really powerful.
Great, thank you. Roshana.
This conference has really got this thought into me, so it's really a combination of, I think, of what everyone has said. I've been reflecting a lot on what ChatGPT did for us, 18 months ago, was really give us a browser if AI was internet. So if you take that analogy with me for a second, but what we have is just a browser. And I'm still waiting for the Wi-Fi, the mobile apps, the app store. Like, I still have all of that to look forward to in the next couple of years. And what will that do for learning? And how do we stay ahead of that is what I'm excited for. And so like really recognizing that we are in such early stages. And today, I think wherever we're using AI in learning, I think we're only using it for the how. Like, we're still using it to create better courses. We're still using it to do more productivity enhancements. But I'm excited to change the what we do in learning. And what if it is not courses? And what will the world look like then?
Yeah, I think in 5 years, when we're back together doing this again, we'll have a lot of that to discuss and talk about. All right, well, please join me in thanking our great panel.